Hello, I'm Bruce Williams. Welcome to Chamber Chats. It's called that because I am the CEO of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I live and work in the ancestral territories and lands of the Lekwungen-speaking Coast Salish nations, the Songhees and the Esquimalt. This presentation today is brought to you by Island Savings, a division of First West Credit Union, and by C-SPAN Victoria Shipyards. And we do this, of course, in the studio of Czech Television, the podcasting studio. Food, restaurants, hospitality, tourism, all of it impacted in a huge way, as we know, throughout this entire pandemic. The phrasing that we use at the Chamber is that all of us are currently taxiing down the recovery runway. When we get to the end of the runway, we're going to have liftoff, and we're waiting to find out when that is. But those that are helping us along the way and maneuvering those pivots are the ones that we call the pivot pilots on that runway. Three of them are with us here today. First of all, Ian Tostenson, who's actually a finalist in this year's Chamber Business Awards. Ian is the CEO and president of the BCRFA, the BC Restaurant and Food Association. Ian, welcome, and thanks for being here. So prior to the pandemic, what was the responsibility of the BCRFA?
Well, I mean, we were the advocating for industry, and we were working on things like the labor supply. We were working on a lot of dining events. We do a lot of dining events on the island and throughout British Columbia, driving business to restaurants, working with the government on red tape and regulation. And actually had spent probably 2 years of my life around ride sharing as I chaired that to bring that into British Columbia, because it had a profound impact on our industry, the ability to access wider transportation. So that was pre-pandemic.
Yeah, a couple of restaurateurs are going to join us shortly. The workforce thing was a factor before COVID. It has been during and it will be after, right? That's pretty much a given.
Absolutely.
So you being a pivot pilot, I'm going to ask you this. What were the immediate pivots and the adaptations that you had to undertake on behalf of your industry members at the very outset of all of this?
I was lucky, having come from the wine business for many years, and we'd had faced a couple of major crises ourselves, and I like a crisis. I think it brings people together, and so we said to the organization, I said, look, we've got one chance to get this right for our industry, 15,000 restaurants that are out of business right now, and we want to look over our shoulders in 2 or 3 years and say, you know what, we did something that was really meaningful here for the small businesses, and I know you have two small businesses coming up and ahead of me or behind me here. Mm-hmm. And that's so important. So we put together 70 restaurants to put and wrote a plan, wrote the opening plan for restaurants and submitted that in 9 days. We submitted to Dr. Henry and the Premier. And we said, this is our commitment to the province of BC and the people of BC on how this industry will function at the highest level with safety first. And that actually was the first plan that went in, and it was the plan that convinced, I think, helped Dr. Henry to have the comfort level with our industry to open us.
There's been change throughout that process, as we know. The situation we're in right now, we were back for a while, then we went back. So what kind of adjustments had to be made for all of that? Because you've got people calling you and emailing and phoning you all the time to ask about this.
Yeah, I mean, we said, I think the Facebook page for the BCRFA said open 5 days a week, for 8 hours a day, whatever. We said we're open 24/7. So we became a complete resource center. So restaurants, they needed a whole bunch of advice and help and maybe answers that we didn't have, but we would go get those answers for them. And we also knew there's some things that we had to make sure the government did. Number one is back off on any sort of outstanding billings, invoices, and owing amounts. Like the cash flow was important. We had a chance to advance liquor policy. We'd been working on that for a few years beforehand, and suddenly now we're able to bring in liquor delivery for takeout and delivery, and also wholesale liquor pricing, which took, it's like 30 years ago we were talking about doing that. So all these things, the government was more than, it was up to us to input to the government as the types of things that will help the industry, because the government doesn't know and the industry does know. So that was it. And then we've been working on a very frustrating situation with, the sort of closures. And we were, up until recently, the only place in North America that never closed a restaurant. And I was so proud of that. But this variant and the situation that we have right now caused the closure of in-store dining. And, we have a great relationship with Dr. Henry and the government, but the way the closures have been handled have been poor. And they've been so hard on the business owner. Just because there's been no notice.
There's a tendency whenever any sort of an edict or a policy is put in place by government. I'm former media. I know this. You immediately look to poke holes in it. You try and find out what's wrong with it. You say, oh, yeah, but what about this? There are some things that have been done well, though, are there not?
Oh, I think the whole thing has been done well. I mean, from all levels of government. I mean, the one thing that was really evident was patios. We wrote a letter to every municipality in the province, and the patio program became something that get rid of the red tape and regulation. And then the liquor licensing branch in Victoria, they said, you know what, turnaround time fast. So that really helped a lot. Like as I mentioned before, around liquor policy, we were able to work with the government on the various grants it has out right now, albeit they're not enough, but they are something. Then we did a fair amount of input on with the federal government on the wage subsidy and rent subsidy program. So all these things, our feeling is the business owner is doing everything right now to try to survive, and they don't have time to chase this grant, that grant. We had HR advice, which was really important through this whole situation. How do you handle your employees? How do we make sure we handle our employees with respect to make sure they come back to us when this is all settled? And now, it's all about the future. I think you pointed that out at the beginning, is that how does this industry open? I think we're going to lose 30% of the 15,000 restaurants, which makes me so sad because the restaurants had no option but to follow the health orders. It makes me sad that that's going to happen, but it also makes me very proud at how this industry has conducted itself. It is low transmission. It's never had an issue with any of its guests, and it's done a miraculous job, albeit very costly job. With plexiglass and restrictions and all the things they had to go through. But it just shows the tenacity and the entrepreneurship in this industry.
What do you think has changed forever about this sector, about the way things operate day to day and week to week?
Oh, I think mainly that the government has a lot more respect for the size and scope and influence this industry has. And I think now when we look at policies, and I know, the chamber, we're going to look at governments from a municipal point of view and not so much a federal point of view, but certainly provincial point of view and municipal, that will respect us a lot more. Because before this, and I know that probably Shellie and Castro will speak to this, it was death by 1,000 cuts. There's so much regulation being put on restaurants and taxation and increase in minimum wages and all those different things. I think they actually thought the restaurant industry was a fat cat industry that held all this. The reality is that the restaurant industry makes about 4 or 5% before tax, and so they also realize the importance of the employment that the industry is responsible for, and youth employment in particular, women employment in particular. So all those things are really important, and the pandemic highlighted all of that. And I think the government was quite astounded to say this is a $15 billion industry, 15,000 restaurants and 190,000 employees. And when all that 190,000 employees went down to about 20,000 because of the closure, I think they really realized that this is a very precious and a very important part of the BC economy.
I think the fat cat impression for restaurants comes from the fact that they're so generous, that they're very generous with things like gift certificates and fundraising
Yep.
things, and that's built into their business case, but that shows that for sure. Okay, we're going to talk next with some people who are day to day operating restaurants. And this is the Chamber Chat that you're watching on Czech Television and online through the Chamber website and the Czech Television website. A couple of restaurateurs join us right now. One is a bit of a veteran, the other is a little bit of a newcomer. But Shellie Gudgeon, for example, she and her husband Mike operate Il Terrazzo, one of this region's favorite restaurants. Shellie, how are you? Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Bruce. I'm very well, thank you.
Good. And Castro Boateng is a guy who's brought a whole new sort of way of dealing with food and talking about food and working with it into his restaurant, House of Boateng in Langford. Castro, nice to see you.
Hi, Bruce. Thank you for having me.
First time you and I encountered each other, we were just talking about this, was when you used to do in-person things at fundraising events and you would show people how to cook. And I'm not a bad cook, but you taught me things I didn't know before. That seems like so long ago when you're gathered around with a bunch of people in person. Like, when's that ever going to come back and what's it going to look like, right?
Yeah. That's the personal touches that we miss right now. It's, I think in the restaurateurs build this business because they want to gather these personal relationship. And right now we're so far from it.
Shellie, at Il Terrazzo, it's a wonderful restaurant. It's very intimate. It's got great spirit. But you had to kind of interrupt all that by doing what you had to do to adjust for COVID. Tell me about that in the very beginning.
Well, first of all, Bruce, I just wanted to thank Ian Tostenson for all the work that he's done on behalf of the restaurant industry. I can't tell you, it's the email I look for and open immediately because it's a great resource. And we hadn't been members consistently, but we certainly applaud what they've done in communicating to us. But we've pivoted incredibly from as everybody has to, we're blessed to have quite a bit of outdoor space. And as you can see where I'm sitting right now, the university, who's our landlord, has been very generous in allowing us to cover it. So now we have guaranteed seating, which we didn't last year. We just had it open without the cover. And we have our terrace in behind and then the terrace out front. So that's been one of the biggest pivots we've done. We've closed lunches because we needed to focus on, it was just too much. There's no one downtown, not a lot of business people. Mm-hmm. And with Dr. Henry's advice, most people are staying in. And so our outdoor eating area, which we've been doing well for the last 29 years, we've really had to step it up a level.
And Castro, you've also taken the option of creating a patio, but you're in Langford where there's always something going on. Langford's always expanding, so you're adjacent to a construction project right now. But when that's over and done with, you'll be full up on the patio too, right?
Absolutely. We've been very lucky with the city of Langford allowing us to use a sidewalk. Now we've expanded our patio to 3 different areas. Unfortunately, there is construction, but it's close to the end, and we look forward to welcoming more of our neighborhood.
Yeah. Ian Tostenson, across the province, different jurisdictions have different rules. How has it been for restaurants to try and make those kind of changes that Shellie and Castro were talking about? Access to sidewalk space, access to patios, rulings, putting roofs on them. How's that been across the province?
Yeah, I think every municipality has been just totally flexible. I mean, Kelowna shut down Bernard Street and allowed just the whole thing to become a big patio. Victoria did the same thing, I think, last year at Blanchard, and probably did the same thing. So that has worked out really well. We are having a bit of an issue right now because of COVID, and this will come out in the next couple of days. The province is sort of fine-tuning their expectations on patios and COVID and airflow. So we've been working in the last couple of weeks with the province to make sure that we have maximum flexibility on these patios, because they're a lifeblood. I mean, Shellie and Castro need some cash here to prepare to get open, and I hope that we're open beginning of June. That's the target here. And if the numbers go in the right direction, then we'll be in a long, slow rebuild, but it's going to be really exciting too. And we have a lot to look forward to. But we've got to, we've got to keep the flexibility with the municipalities. And so, if anybody's listening to this as a restaurant and having problems getting a patio, call us. We'll help you.
Good. That's why you're there, and that's what you do. Mm-hmm. Shellie, you made the reference to there not being the number of workers downtown as before. Castro, you're in Langford, close to a lot of people who are working from home and will probably be doing so for quite some time, if not forever, for that matter. How's that changed the dynamic of business in and out of your restaurant with people working closer to you?
For us, it's changed a little bit. What we have is we have more younger people come into the restaurant because they feel more comfortable because they're not going to work. But most of our demographic was the older population, and they're not coming out. So it's almost, we have all these new people, but the people that really have been supporting us over the last 2 years are slowly slipping out and staying home. So we're trying to find ways to navigate that as well.
Yeah. Shellie, you've just pivoted to nighttime only, as you mentioned. We're not sure whether office workers are going to go back in the robust numbers they did before or not. Does that mean that this is a permanent change for you, do you think?
I was just chatting with my husband and our chef. We will continue with that. We were old school restaurateurs. We thought that if you have a restaurant, you're open, you open at 11, you stay open till the end of the day, and you open 7 days a week. So it was hard for us to make that decision to close our lunches because we've been doing it forever. But we now see the benefit. We open at 4:00 instead of 5. That hour has made a big difference in the summertime in the bottom line. And it's helped us, really focus on the cleanliness aspect too. In doing the deep cleaning that's required now. We have to, and that's a great thing. This is one of the silver linings, I think, of COVID is the customer demands everything to be absolutely immaculate and clean, and we need the time to do that. And so now going forward, we will spend the daytime hours and have a sanitation person clean all the surfaces and ensure that it's spotless.
Right. Ian, it's always been a fact that the core of any city or town or municipality is where a lot of the culture and entertainment and culinary stuff is. But with people working closer to home, are the suburban areas across the province seeing that same thing that Castro's talking about?
It's a totally different story in the suburban areas. They're doing quite well, actually, restaurants in their local community. I mean, restaurants are the community nested to help the community, local community. But you're seeing a lot of restaurants now in Victoria and Vancouver having to pivot in all sorts of things. Meal kits and aggressive takeout and delivery and some real innovative stuff that will protect them, I think, in the future. So next time there's a pandemic, we're going to know what we're doing here. But some of the meal kits and some of the cocktail offerings and some of the restaurants have been amazing. And people are saying, to Castro's point, to stay home, but they can have the experience of a restaurant in their backyard, or the restaurants have been wonderful that way.
Anytime there's a crisis, there's also opportunity, and that's a chance to do things a little bit differently. We're going to talk about that next. So when you take a look at what your menu looked like, Castro, I'll start with you. Your menu 18 months ago compared to the menu now, what's different about it?
We decided to do a lot more take and bake, so people can enjoy the meal, as Ian was saying, at home. And our dinner, we're going more of a casual dinner, because it's sitting out on the patio. We want somebody to be able to enjoy a glass of wine and maybe a small bite, and then have a few more other bites, then have a full meal. So I think for us, our menus are going to be a little bit more casual, so people can enjoy that atmosphere of sitting outside.
Right. Shellie, how about you? Is anything menu 18 months ago compared to now?
Our dinner menu is the same. All the great favorites that people have for all these years are still on it. And of course, the chefs do regional and seasonal. But we resisted doing takeout at the outset of the pandemic. We had a lot of people say, just do takeout. And we didn't feel that we wanted to create a different, the Il Terrazzo experience at home. So it took us, we spent quite a bit of time, but we've developed an at-home program where everything is plated in porcelain. And people pay a deposit for the dishes, and it is given to them at it's run out. We have the parking spots from the city that people can pull up their car to, and we put it out in porcelain dishes. And so it's lovely, and we're getting very good feedback. We've been running it about 3 or 4 months now, and we will probably keep that going. As well as what we, in this recent circuit breaker shutdown, we are doing regular takeout as well. So we are doing both versions of takeout. The regular takeout at the door, where people just phone in the day of, that will, when we open, we will be canceling that, but we will keep the at home going, because with 48 hours notice, we can prepare it and do a really nice job of it. So we're keeping our the same sort of feeling that you get in the restaurant a little bit by having it a little bit more special.
Yeah, you got a wow from Ian on that porcelain plate thing. Ian,
I know. Can you deliver to North Vancouver, Sheila?
It would be
so good.
You know what? We can try.
It would be worth it.
And we'll do our best. We're in the hospitality industry, and Ian, we do whatever it takes.
I want to just take a slightly different tack here to wrap this up today. One of the priorities for the Chamber right now is that we've realized that here on the island, we do not have food security or food sovereignty. We import 90% of our food. That makes us very vulnerable. So the opportunity for us to, first of all, grow a food economy here means it's a lower carbon footprint from not bringing those things in from elsewhere. And number two, it means that we're not creating jobs in other jurisdictions where they're producing and growing food for us. Castro, the local food supply chain, if it was more robust, would be probably a pretty good thing for you, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have these people here that work so hard for us before we even get up out of bed and get the food ready for us. One of the toughest things I had to do was to call a farmer and say, I don't know if I'm going to be able to commit to 160 pounds of vegetables that I wanted this spring. And that broke my heart, because these depend on me just the same as my staff. But with everything everybody's done, our farmers came to us and said, what, how can we help? How can we get this together? And every day they're doing things that they normally never used to do. They're delivering 3 times a week now instead of maybe once a week, because they know we can't take food here and hope that people will come and get it. So it's just building that community with them, and them realizing that we need them as much as they need us. I think the one thing COVID has done is has strengthened our relationship with our customers, our relationship with our staff, and our relationship with our farmers. And the way our food security is going, we've made the decision to stay open so we can keep them going, because we need them to be thriving as much as us once we get going again.
Yeah, Shellie, same thing. Local, really, I look for local on menus. I think a lot of people do, don't they?
Absolutely, they do. I know 5-10 years ago, pre-COVID, it was a little bit difficult because we do quite a high volume pre-COVID at our restaurant, and it was hard getting a real sustainable supply from the farmers because on a consistent level. So where we could, we did, whereas now it is slower. It's one of the silver linings. We are able to access more local food source, and also to really encourage the bigger suppliers. Islands West, who does a lot of, through pressure from restaurateurs and chefs, are dealing with the local farmer a lot more than they were 10 years ago. So we're very glad to see that. And my brother has 10 acres, obviously, as well, that we chat with. So this has made a difference in understanding the impact on the local farmers, on the local worker. That's what the customer wants, and that's what we want to give them, because we're in the hospitality industry.
Yeah, well, yeah, 10 acres, chamber member,
Yeah.
downtown and in
Yeah,
Sydney too, so
that's
you got
right.
access to the farm. Just want to wrap this up with something that's a little bit like, it's not a fantasy, I don't want to call it that, but if you were able to sit down and have a couple of words with Dr. Bonnie Henry, what would, you made that noise right out loud. What would you say? What would you ask? What would you suggest? Shellie, what would you say to her? And this is a respectful moment, but what would you say to her if you could?
Oh no, she's my hero. So let's start from the very beginning. I think I've got a tea towel with her: be kind, be safe, be calm. I mean, she brought a lot of calmness to our family. What I'd say to her right now is that the restaurants aren't the cause of the outbreak. As my husband said, since they've done this circuit breaker, cases have gone up.
Yeah.
You know, like we actually are the food service professionals, and I think that we are being unfairly penalized in this latest circuit breaker.
Yeah, I hear you. Castro, a couple of words?
Yeah, for me, I would like to say, first of all, thank you to her for an amazing job she's done. I have 2 young kids, and for us to have them in school and be able to come to work, it's huge for my wife. So we're very, very thankful for that. And we know the position that she's in. It's a hard position. I wouldn't want to be in that position. But I want her, once the time comes and we're able to operate, I want her to be the cheerleader for us now. We've done our bit. We're going out there making sure we're keeping our staff employed, making sure that we're keeping our community safe. So when the time comes for us to get back to doing what we should be doing, we want her to be talking to the government and making sure that they're helping us through this, because we're holding on as much as we can, but we're going to need help down the line. They can't just say, open your doors and then that's it, leave us alone. We're going to need her to be our cheerleader in the future.
Yep, I hear you. Castro Boateng, House of Boateng in Langford, and Shellie Gudgeon from Terrazzo in downtown Victoria. Thank you both. Hang in there. We will see you on the other side for sure, and we'll come out of this stronger. Ian Tostenson, BCRFA, you guys have a website. That's the best way to reach you?
Yes, indeed. Yep.
Okay. Ian Tostenson is the CEO and president of the BC Restaurant and Food Association. I'm Bruce Williams. See you next time for another Chamber Chat.